All right, welcome back. As promised, I'm joined now by Jess Root. Jess runs and operates the awesome Arizona Cardinals website for SB Nation, Revenge of the Birds, which is one of my favorite fan-based websites over there. They've got some great content, and it's been too long since I've talked to Jess, who was a guest on a podcast that I used to host for NGSC Sports. Jess, thanks so much for joining me. I really do appreciate it.
Okay, thanks for having me on. I appreciate you having me on again. It's been a while.
It has. It's been too long. I'm so excited about the Cardinals season. Jess knows that I'm a closet, not really so much a closet Arizona Cardinals fan. I love Coach Arians. We're going to talk about him here in a minute. Some really exciting young talent on that team. It's been a great year. They are entering the divisional round this weekend, going to be playing the Green Bay Packers, another team that I like a lot. So it's a fantastic matchup. The last match was decidedly very much in the Cardinals' favor. I don't think it's going to be quite that lopsided this time, though. Do you?
Oh, heavens, no. I mean, 30-point wins, 30-point losses seem to be the aberration.
Yeah.
And especially a team that was, I mean, the game went sideways. Green Bay was already down their starting cornerback. They were already down their left tackle. They lost B.J. Raji in the game. They lost a couple other offensive linemen, and so the floodgates opened.
Yeah.
And so no, they're playing confidently. They got kind of their swag back. I'm not so. I don't buy into the fact that Green Bay's back because they really didn't play fantastically all year.
No, they didn't. They really
didn't.
But
if the Cardinals play the way they should, I mean, they should win this game. And even I could even see them covering the 7.5 that is expected. Other than that, I mean, it's not going to be a 30-point game. I'd expect it to be within a touchdown, maybe 10 points.
Yeah, you mentioned the left tackle situation. The Packers' offensive line is very much a concern. Last time they went with Barclay. This time around, they made a change in the last game. They're going with J.C. Treader, and he played very well, I thought, for the stage that he was on and the experience that he had. And so it does look like it's a very, I don't want to use the word serviceable, but it was a good move for them.
Yeah, and the one thing that sort of the game that they matched up the very first time, the pass rush the Cardinals had wasn't anything they had the entire year, and the floodgates opened. I mean, Dwight Freeney, they had his sack party, Calais Campbell, Marcus Golden. I mean, it was a little bit of everybody. So yeah, it's just another one of those cases where it should look like a regular playoff game. Is what you come down to. It'll look like a playoff game.
There was an interesting question on ESPN.com. I tweeted it out as I was preparing for this interview with you. And thanks again, by the way. I really do appreciate it. It's such a pleasure to have you on. And I'm, again, just so excited about this game this weekend. But the question was, which number one draft selection, and they're talking about the quarterback position, would you want? Carson Palmer is one of them, Peyton Manning, Alex Smith. People forget that Alex Smith was the number one overall selection too, or Cam Newton. And it's a great question. And all of those guys, I mean, Peyton not having the year that he's had in the past, sort of the twilight of his year, but still a very good quarterback in his own right. And obviously, I mean, you would want Carson Palmer, wouldn't you?
Well, if you're talking right now, you'd have to top. For me, it would be a toss-up between Palmer and Cam Newton. The reason why you'd think you would lean towards Cam Newton, if you're only talking this year only, I'd take Palmer. He's still playing at a very high level, and I think he's a better quarterback. He plays the quarterback position really as well as anyone in the league. And this year is sort of in the case where he became the quarterback that everyone thought he could be coming out of the USC, only he never he got there almost, then sort of fell off. But Cam Newton, if you're going to look beyond this year, I don't think it would be crazy not to take Cam Newton, seeing what he's already done and what he still can achieve, because he hasn't even come close to to peaking as a passer.
I completely agree with that. And when you consider their situation at wide receiver, and he's definitely one of the more probably it would be a toss-up maybe between him and Russell Wilson as to which one of them are the most exciting young quarterback in the league. There's a lot of talent there. I completely agree. You might face the Carolina Panthers in that conference championship round. That would be very exciting. If it's in Carolina, I'm going to be covering that game. So we'll see how that transpires. I want to ask you, as I was preparing, something struck me, and I didn't go do the research. I was going to rely on you on this. But the Cardinals have 2 1,000-plus receiving wide receivers. When was the last time that happened?
It was 2009 when they had a really, really good deal in Larry Fitzgerald and Anquan Bolden with Kurt Warner throwing to them. In 2008, they actually had 3 that year with Warner. They had Fitz, they had Bolden. They also had Steve Breston who squeaked into 1,000 yards.
Yes,
and then parlayed that a year later into a $25 million deal with the Chiefs. And he never was quite the same health-wise, and I loved Steve Breston. He was one of my favorite players. But yeah, so we haven't seen a passing offense out here of this prolific nature since Kurt Warner. I mean, it hands down.
Yeah, it's amazing, and I'm so happy for Larry Fitzgerald, who unfortunately, during the prime of his career, didn't play with, he got a few years with Kurt Warner, who's going to go into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. There's no question whatsoever in my mind. We're not going to have that debate here, but is he up this year? I forget. Where is he in that process?
Warner, he was a finalist. I think he was in the final 10 last year. He's a finalist again this year.
Okay. All right. So that was pretty exciting. But and everybody knows what Larry Fitzgerald is capable of, and I'm so happy for that guy. But the one I want to talk about is your young wide receiver, John Brown. I'm a big, big, big fan. I've bought heavily into him in fantasy football. What has his emergence meant for that Arizona Cardinals offense?
Well, you can look at a couple of things, and you think about the season that Larry Fitzgerald had, and you can point to really kind of 2 or 3 things as to what caused that resurgence. One of them is John Brown, because of what he did on offense a year ago, the threat that he is down the field. He's quietly a very, very, very confident receiver. He's like a lot of receivers. He made and it didn't come out in the same sort of press clippings as you normally get, because it was kind of asked. He said he doesn't think anyone can cover him. But it wasn't said in a brash, Richard Sherman type way. It was said in a quiet John Brown way. And the combination of his route running, the fluidity of his movements in and out of his breaks, and then just his out-and-out breakaway speed makes him the perfect receiver for what Bruce Arians wants to do. And if you look at Bruce Arians' track record with drafting receivers, there's kind of a mold that he picks. It's 3rd round later. They're smaller, very fast guys. Look at some of the guys that he's picked up. He's got, he's got Antonio Brown. He's got Emmanuel Sanders. He's got a number of these types of receivers who are that same type of guy. And T.Y. Hilton is another one.
I was going to ask you if he was responsible for T.Y. Hilton, because he came to my mind when you were mentioning Emmanuel Sanders. Yeah.
Yeah, he was on that Colts staff when they drafted him. So he's that type of player, and so he moves in and out of his breaks. He gets down the field, which makes him so good. And that spread, and the combination of the receivers they have between Brown, Michael Floyd, and Larry Fitzgerald really makes it impossible to key on any one. But Brown has such a big, you look at what T.Y. Hilton did in year 2, year 3. You see Brown crack 1,000 yards this year, and he left yards on the field because there were a couple of drops out there.
Yeah, he did have some drops.
But you see the potential of what he can be, and you think, you know, given the right situation with another year, he could be an Antonio Brown type player, especially the way the league is going in terms of passing offenses. It's just astronomical numbers across the board.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. You mentioned the Cardinals having 3 1,000-yard receivers. Michael Floyd came pretty close. Right now he's at 849, and he had a big game against the Packers the last time. So, you know, you have to mention him too, and he's just he's a guy. He doesn't get a lot of attention, but he's a solid wide receiver in his own right.
He is. What hurt him this year were a number of injuries. He started off the preseason in training camp. He came down and broke dislocated some fingers in his hand. He came down really funny, came down on his hand and he hit some bone. And actually, he showed he's kind of grossed out everyone. He had bone pop out. It wasn't a fracture. It was a dislocation. Nothing broke, but it popped out of the skin. And so it took him a while, and John Brown played well enough, kind of took his starting spot, so he started out slowly. His career has been marked by inconsistency. Entering this year, he'd had, you know, as many games where he got at least 90 yards in a game as he had less than 30. So he's big and he's down, and this year it started out the same way, but then over the last 8 weeks of the season, and I sort of think I jinxed him because, you know, he'd never had a stretch like this. So entering the final game against the Seattle, he had over those previous 7 games 5 100-yard or more games, and another of 70, and then, you know, nothing happened against Seattle. And it was the best, and you look at it and say he finally developed into the guy, and they would have had 3 if he'd have been healthy all year, likely. And Bruce Arians, the thing about Floyd, he's kind of been the forgotten guy because he's almost been disappointing because he hasn't developed into a star, and that's kind of what they drafted him to be. But he gives Bruce Arians a little of everything because he gets size and he's got top-end speed. So Arians isn't used to having that, a guy who's as big and physical he is with that same top-end speed.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing that the Cardinals offense, when you consider the offensive drought that they went through for several years, how prolific that offense has been. And I'm so happy for Carson Palmer. He stayed healthy. He was really doing well before he went down, and so were the Cardinals before he went down last year. So I'm happy for him. His name has been in the conversation for most valuable player. It does look like Cam Newton is probably going to walk away. I know that there's been one vote. I think there's another MVP vote that's still remaining out there. So kind of be interesting to see how that goes down. David Johnson was another guy in fantasy that I bought heavily into. I drafted him everywhere I got a chance to and held on to him. I know a lot of people were, with the emergence of Chris Johnson, were starting to move on. But I as a person who watched Chris Johnson's career, I was like, well, it's kind of hard for me to buy in. So I held on, and I was very, very happy that I held on to David Johnson. What has his emergence? And he almost, I haven't crunched the numbers, he has right at 1,000 yards from scrimmage as well.
He does, and it's really kind of amazing to see what he did over the final month of the year. It was an interesting tweet. I think it was Josina Anderson from ESPN, who said there was an insider she talked to from within the organization they were that stacked at running back, the Cardinals were, to start the year. They could have turned David Johnson into the Rookie of the Year if they wanted to. But between Andre Ellington and Chris Johnson, they didn't need him, and so they brought him along in little bits and pieces. I mean, playing at the small school that he did, you don't want to overload a rookie that much that early, and they didn't. And he's paying off in big dividends now because they had him returning kicks. They had him, in passing situations. He's really dynamic as a pass catcher.
He really is. He really is fantastic. I'm so glad that you mentioned that. That I think is one of the things that is the most fun to watch about his game.
Well, it is because he's built so big. I mean, 6'1", 224, and he's so fast. But you see him run routes, and this is in part because when he started college, he was a receiver, so the position isn't foreign to him. But you see him, and especially with his size, the way Bruce Arians talked entering 2014 about Andre Ellington, about being a guy who's going to get the ball, going to touch the ball 25 to 30 times, 20 carries, 10 catches. He never held up. That's what David Johnson, and that's what David Johnson is. He's that type of guy, only he's bigger and ideally sturdier a player. It's almost like they took Andre Ellington and they had the same guy,
and supersized
bigger and supersized him. Yes,
right. Yeah. Another guy on offense that I want to ask you about, and then we're going to talk a little bit about the defense, and that is Darren Fells. I love Uncle Bruce. I just wish Uncle Bruce would use his tight ends a little bit more. Darren Fells is a guy that's always intrigued me. I think that if given the chance, he could be one of those pass-catching tight ends, but it doesn't seem like that's in their offensive game plan.
It's not. The tight end position, and I'll give you kind of an insight here. They have a tight end that they throw the ball to. His name's Larry Fitzgerald.
Okay.
But he's not a tight end. That's how they use Fitzgerald. Yeah. A lot of teams use kind of the flex back where you got your Jimmy Grahams or you got your Rob Gronkowski. The way they use Larry Fitzgerald in the passing game is how a lot of other teams use the tight ends, and so they do a lot of one tight end, two tight end sets. But those one tight end sets, Jermaine Gresham, Darren Fells, they're there to block. And to be an outlet if necessary. They have their pass catching tight end. He's named Larry Fitzgerald. Only we don't insult him by calling him a tight end because he's so much better. But that's the role he plays in a lot of other offenses. It's the same type of thing.
I think that's a brilliant observation. I hadn't really thought about it that way, but now that you mention it, that made an incredible amount of sense. On defense, of course, your defense is very good. It's been good for a pretty good while now. Losing Honey Badger, that was a blow, but other guys have stepped up. But I want to ask you what the addition of I'm blanking on his name. Let me look through your roster real quick. Dwight Freeney. How important has his addition been to that defense?
Well, it's a number of things. One, I mean, he's been there and done that, and two, he has the talent. You saw, I mean, I'm not personally a big guy and to talk about the number on pressures, and that's like kind of a new next generation stat that everyone uses to talk about the number of pressures, and because so many big plays happen off of pressure plays. And good quarterbacks, good quarterbacks when they're pressured, they make plays. Bad quarterbacks and average quarterbacks when they're pressured, negative plays happen. But when they are looking at sort of the metrics, the coaches looked at the last couple of years, he was still making disruptions. And they looked at this defense and say, we're going to keep him on their 20, 25 plays. He's got a Pro Bowl defensive tackle ahead. He's never had a better defensive tackle ahead of him. He's never had the secondary behind him. So if we stick him in these particular situations, we think he'll be successful. Guess what? He had, 4 sacks over his previous 2 years? He's got 8 this year and half the season. And so he's given the element they had in 2013 with John Abraham, the guy that they can't block one-on-one. Freeney's, he's not going to do that consistently, but what you get is he can beat guys one-on-one when their other pass rushers, Alex Okafor, he's not really a one-on-one guy. He's a cleanup guy. He's a secondary factor.
And he's injured now, right?
He is, and that's a story that hasn't been told yet.
Yeah.
He was just placed on NFI. It sounds like, the NFI list, that's a bad list to be on, especially this time of year. Bruce Arians in his presser today said he wouldn't talk about the toe injury that ended his season, and he said you'll have to ask him. The Cardinals' experience with the NFI list has been this. Jonathan Dwyer last year after his arrest, and then there was the allegations that he was, was threatening to hurt himself. And they pushed him on NFI. Years ago, after the Cardinals drafted Thomas Jones ended out of town. He broke his hand, allegedly, on a telephone. Answering a phone, he punched a telephone or something, broke his hand. Those type of things, Jason Pierre-Paul, that's an NFI type thing. So he was, it sounds like, because from the impression I get, the team is unhappy with what happened. Yeah. And so he was a knucklehead about something. That story will probably come out, and now they're down Okafor.
Yeah, they added Jason Babb, and he's a guy who's been in the league for a while. He's bounced around a little bit. Do you like? Obviously, they had to do something. Do you like that addition?
He hasn't done anything in a long while.
It's been a pretty good while.
It's been a long while since he did something, but as a guy, if they give him a role, a Freeney type role, okay, you go after the quarterback in this situation, it could be successful. But they needed a body back there, and so they've got some guys right now. I think he's at the back of the depth chart who might get a few snaps here and there.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about your other injury situation. There was some noise that Chris Johnson might come back. We haven't heard any news about him. Give us an update.
Well, because he was placed on the injured reserve designated to return, the absolute earliest he could come back based on the 8-week rule is if he can come back only for the Super Bowl. He's ahead of schedule. He started working out. He said he's ahead of schedule, and he's actually very, very happy the team decided to put him on that and to bring him back. Now, there was no loss to do that because that was the last week they could use it, and he was a significant of a player that they do that. He's been back on the field. He can't officially practice yet until, I believe, next week, but I believe next week he will be on. He says he'll be back on the field full throttle. And he says he expects him. I mean, they didn't shut him down. If they made designated for return, he feels, because he'll get used. And I think he will be probably the bell cow, at least early on in games, come the Super Bowl if he's there. Because in a Super Bowl, as important as a guy like David Johnson would be, he's still a rookie. And Bruce Arians has proven to me over the past couple of years, while he's willing to play young players, he's not willing to count on them, and so he always has a backup plan.
Yeah, he prefers veterans. There's no question about that. I think the thing that weighs in David Johnson's favor is he's a much better pass-catching back than Chris Johnson ever has been, and if you look at the numbers, you definitely see that Chris Johnson putting up really good numbers in the running game, but he's just not. Despite his speed and despite everything else, and I've watched him up close and personal for a long, long, long time, he's just not a guy that you want to rely on, in that passing game. Any other injuries that you're keeping an eye on?
Well, let's see. On the offensive side of the ball, things look good. Carson Palmer, dislocated his finger during that. I can't remember which game it was. It was Philly against the Eagles. That's fine. On the defensive side of the ball, they had a couple of key injuries. Marcus Golden became their very consistent pressure on the quarterback. He should be back this week. Josh Morrow, a rotational guy on the defensive line, should be back. But the bye came at a good time because they were starting to get banged up, and it looks like, at least for now, everyone will be as good as they could be. Andre Ellington isn't going to be 100% probably until the off season. He's still dealing with turf toe, but he's well enough to play and to play at an okay level.
I had not noticed. I guess maybe I had missed this, or just it hadn't stuck in my brain, that the Cardinals had added DJ Swearinger. Is there a role for him on that defense?
Well, right now, how things play out, it's that all their safeties are healthy. He is their seventh defensive back when they go with the 7 DBs, which they do every once in a while, if you still count David Buchanan as a defensive back. He's basically an every down linebacker, but if your terms of charting, if you count him as a defensive back, they will go from time to time with 7 DBs. Swearinger is that 7th DB. And he was, when Rashad Johnson was out, he was a starter. He was a starter out there.
What was your impression?
Well, fierce. And he played much better I mean, the reputation he got, the alleged allegations where he got cut because he refused to play special teams. What did he do? We saw him the first 2 weeks he was on the team. He was out there on special teams.
Wow.
So whether he was humbled or there was a misunderstanding of the report, he's been great, and he's intense, which is what you want in that backfield. And he's where he's playing within the rules, he hasn't had that issue where he's been outside of those rules yet.
Well, that's good. I was a fan. I'm still a fan of him, and I got to see him a lot, playing in the SEC. And you always want guys to do well. Are there any matchups in particular that you think our listeners should be on the watch out for? We've pretty much covered everything. Any other matchups of interest to you in this game?
Well, I'm particularly interested in to see a healthy Packers offensive line, how they hold up, and how the Cardinals pass rush goes. Obviously, minus Okafor, bringing Golden back, will the Cardinals be able to generate that sort of pressure, or even some sort of pressure? Because that's sort of been their thing all year. They are a very good front-running defense, if I can call them that, without being insulting to them. Because they stop the run very well. But the way they're built, personally, I've seen as if they have a physical team that stays close and is able to run the ball physically, they do wear down. We saw it in their earlier losses in the season against Pittsburgh and against St. Louis. But everything else, they've been able to stop the run, which limits them to the other team, and plus their offense scores points, and so it makes them one-dimensional on offense, the Packers. And if what the Packers were able to do is run the ball successfully. If they are able to run the ball like they did against Washington, which I don't think so, it should be an interesting game.
Yeah.
I'm interested. Again, the matchup that we'll want to see is it like last time is Justin Bethel against James Jones, because Aaron Rodgers picked on him all game. All game, and for the most part, they were insignificant games. Yes, many of them for first downs, but picked up the big interference call down the field. He didn't get the interception. So that's a matchup that's going to go both ways.
But that's a very good learning experience for him.
Yes, and the one thing that Bethel, who's for the last 2.5 seasons. The coaching staff and players have raved about his talent, talking about how he's as athletically gifted, if not more, than even Patrick Peterson. And Patrick Peterson, who is as athletically gifted as you'll find, and has turned himself into a shutdown corner. So it's a matter of now, is he getting the reps out there on the field, but is he going to give up plays? Because, Gerard Powers, is as much as people have not liked him in that corner 2 role, he's a better corner than Justin Bethel. But Bethel has a higher ceiling because he's not as smart as Powers has been.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun game. I'm very excited for it. A lot of good games this weekend. I want to get your impression on them before I let you get out of here. But I don't want to leave the Cardinals yet. I have to ask you. It's still early, and I'm not trying to jinx anything. But do you have an off-season wish list yet?
Well, obviously the main thing is, if you're looking ahead, the offensive line looks okay. I think they need to address the center position. They are adequate there with Lyle Sunline. They brought in A.Q. Shipley, but they've addressed every other position every single year, either with a high-priced free agent or a significant draft pick the past couple of years. And, they need a pass rusher. A luxury would be, okay, who's going to be the guy to succeed Carson Palmer? Is he going to be here 1 more year, 2 years, 3 more years? At some point, somebody needs to take his place.
Yeah. And speaking of that, and I meant to ask you this earlier, Gerald Washington, you don't hear a lot about him. He's still on the roster. He hasn't played in a couple of seasons. Obviously, he still has, he has to reapply, and he still has the domestic violence conviction out there. And it would be, really, it would go against the odds for him to be effective at this point, don't you think?
If there's one thing that we can do by reading between the lines that we know about, he's done as a Cardinal. There are whispers out there. There's some reports out there that the Cardinals are trying to recoup some signing bonus money. That to me is number one, because the only reason why they haven't cut him right at this point is because of salary cap implications. If they can get signing bonus money back, he will be done. But they don't have to do anything because he's still suspended. And as far as we know, there's been multiple violations. The Glazer report came out, said there are multiple violations while he was suspended. The commissioner said nothing has changed, so it hasn't come to him yet. And so obviously Washington hasn't been doing what he's supposed to. And even then, if and when he gets reinstated, he's still probably looking at, anywhere between 4 and 8 games suspension after that.
Yeah, it's really sad. Carson Palmer is, is having a fantastic season, but he is, getting on up there. It's hard to think that Drew Stanton is the answer once Carson Palmer is done. At what point do they address the quarterback situation?
Well, Steve Keim will tell you they try to do it every year, but they don't. It's going to come via trade, which probably not going to happen. It's going to come via draft unless they're lucky, unless they magically can find a Kurt Warner off the trash heap like they did many years ago. And even then, Kurt Warner, after they signed him, was still on the trash heap even with the Cardinals.
Because they had Matt Leinart.
They had Matt Leinart. Fans booed Warner off the field for the number of times he fumbled and wanted Leinart to play. It was after that he sort of came around. I mean, are the Raiders going to trade us another franchise quarterback with a 7th-round pick? I mean, we'll take it. Drew Stanton is, to me, he's a very good backup, and to me, he's the equivalent of a healthy Kevin Cobb when he's out there. He's going to win you some games. But you have to get him in a rhythm. He's not a high-end starter, and I can see that. But he's talented. You can see it in practice. There is a definite drop-off between Carson and Drew, and it's noticeable. Carson is a top-end talent, an elite thrower, and who's finally put it together. Every team, every team who has a top-end starter like that, like the Packers. How long is Aaron Rodgers going to be? Do they need to adjust it now? Tom Brady, and Peyton Manning, is Brock Osweiler the answer? I don't know. So every team with an older quarterback, Tony Romo in Dallas, you look ahead and say, well, he's good, but for how long? And then what? Yeah, it's hard for a team to do that.
It is. They don't grow on trees, and that's why teams are always looking for them. The Cardinals were favored to win the Super Bowl. They're going to have to get past the Packers, and then whoever they play in that conference championship game. A lot of great games this weekend. I want to get your impression. Chiefs, Patriots. I've been saying that I've got a feeling that this might be the Chiefs' year, but they are going to face a very, very, very tough Patriots team in Foxborough.
I as well as the Chiefs have played, I look at their schedule over the last 2 months, including their playoff game. They haven't beat anyone of any significance for 2 months. They do have a couple of good wins under the belts, and that were 2 months ago. And so, you still look at that team. They've got an Alex Smith-led offense who Alex Smith is a very competent quarterback, a very good quarterback. But the offense that they run, I mean...
He's no Carson Palmer.
No. I mean, they throw everything short of the sticks. I mean, he's perfect for Andy Reid, but you look at, especially, is there ever a time that you can say, okay, Tom Brady on his home field, can you ever think that he's going to lose there in the playoffs? I can't. I can't say that's going to happen. So, and I haven't bought into the Chiefs. I think Tom Brady's been there, done that.
But the Patriots aren't playing very well right now either.
No, but there's two things. As long as they have Tom Brady, as long as they have Rob Gronkowski, and if they're playing in Foxborough, I like them every single time.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's really hard to pick the Chiefs. But again, I think if they are going to beat the Patriots, this might be the year because, the Patriots have not played all that well. They dropped their last 2 games. But you're right. You never count out Tom Brady, and you never, ever count out Wild Bill. The other AFC game, and then we'll talk about Seahawks, Panthers. The other AFC game, Steelers, Broncos. I'm really excited for that matchup.
That is, wow, that's going to be fun. And especially, I want to see what Peyton Manning. I want to see what Peyton Manning is because I'm a huge Peyton Manning fan, and you know that this year was just not a good Peyton year. It was a new offense. He clearly wasn't healthy. The arm strength is still diminishing. But then you're looking at Antonio Brown is looking like he might not play. The Steelers' pass defense is horrific.
Yes.
So this game goes either way. Playing in Denver, I don't know which way this game goes. I mean,
my feeling, of course, I'm a Peyton Manning fan, Tennessee alum. I think the Broncos are going to win that game. D'Angelo Williams, I think he's still. There's some hope that he will play. But they had some young running backs that really stepped up. In that last game. It's going to be fun. Seahawks, Panthers. A lot of people talking about, how narratives go, that this is the conference championship game. Ho hum. It's going to be a great game. There's no doubt whatsoever about that. What are your thoughts on it?
This is going to be, Seattle is definitely going to be up for this game, having lost to Carolina in Seattle. But playing in Carolina, that's going to be a rock in place. And you saw it against Minnesota. They didn't do much. They can be stopped. They can be stopped. Carolina's got a great defense. But, you look at that Carolina team, they don't have a ton of weapons outside of Cam Newton, who's making, Ted Ginn look good.
No, right? Nobody's made Ted Ginn look good except Cam Newton, ever.
And so, the experience that Seattle has, along with they do have top-end talent on defense, but at the same time, they went into Seattle and beat them. And I know beating a team twice in the regular season is tough. I consider that game a toss-up.
Yeah, it's going to. I think it's going to be a close, low-scoring game. And I think the Panthers are going to win it. I definitely think that it's going to be Panthers, Cardinals in the conference championship game. But you're right. The Seahawks are a very confident football team and played really well in the last game. And Russell Wilson has been fantastic. Really weird situation with Marshawn Lynch. What do you make of all of that?
Well, that's an interesting thing. I think the cold was too much for him. He's a guy who's coming back from an injury, and that cold, oh my goodness. I don't blame him. If you're going to get your first game back, would you really want to do it in negative temperatures?
Especially when you're talking about a groin injury like that.
Yeah, and so I understand that, but I don't understand what goes on. He's obviously a smart man and a very good passion. He's crucial to what Seattle does. But does anyone really understand Marshawn Lynch?
No, he's an
and they've been really good about keeping it under wraps about what his actual status is. Coaches lie all the time. Maybe he's not ready. That's the thing. Maybe he's just not ready.
Yeah, it's a very interesting situation. I think, regardless of how it pans out, I think that this is Marshawn Lynch's last year in Seattle. They're going to owe him a lot of money next year. He didn't play as many games, as I think that they would have wanted to and would have liked. The off season is going to be extremely interesting. Bruce Arians is one of my favorite coaches in the league. I love the guy. Is there any way we could possibly get him, once he is done with the fun of being an NFL coach, get him to be NFL commissioner?
Oh, that would be I don't.
I would love it.
It would be great. I don't think the owners would love it, because if there's one thing that he does, he speaks his mind, and he's not PC. And as entertaining as he would be, I don't think he'd make the owners more money. I think he'd be more likely to.
He'd be taking money from them. They wouldn't like that at all. Speaking of the owners, kind of the big story today, the owners meeting, their relocation talks. There's going to be conference realignment. It's going to probably impact the AFC, maybe more than the NFC. But I don't know. They might. Seattle used to be in the AFC. What do you think is going to transpire there?
It sounds like the favorite. I mean, what might be the recommended situation is in Inglewood that it'll be San Diego and St. Louis. And if that's the case, I don't think there will be any necessity for realignments. I know the kind of the realignment thought was if you wouldn't want two AFC teams playing in the same stadium for TV purposes. You know, you're going to maximize your money otherwise, and so you treat it like this. If the Rams move and the Chargers move together, I think nothing changes in terms of realignment. If the Chargers and Raiders move, then I think you look at having to realign things and moving either the Raiders or the Chargers to the NFC West and shifting an NFC West team over to the AFC. And yes, Seattle does make sense, and you know I wouldn't cry about Seattle going to the AFC because those fans are something else.
They really are, really, really are. Jess, it's such a pleasure to have you on. It's been too long. I'm so thankful that we were able to make this happen. Tell everybody out there where they can find you, and give a big plug to Revenge of the Birds.
All right, well, the site is revengeofthebirds.com. It's our SB Nation Arizona Cardinals site. Hit me up at Twitter at Senor Jess Root, SenorJessRoot, or my site account, which is at Revenge of Birds.
Well, good luck to the Cardinals this weekend. I'll definitely be watching. My heart's going to be torn because two of my favorite teams are playing. I do think the Cardinals are going to win, but good luck to them. And let's hope that there are no significant injuries.
All right. Amen to that. Thanks for having me on.
All right. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.